Today I'm going to be changing the front brake pads on my 1999 Ford Taurus with a 3.0 dual overhead cam engine. I believe this will cover the Ford Taurus from 1996 to 2007. The front brakes on them year models are pretty much the same. I already have this side jacked up and a jack stand under it, so I'm going to start off by taking off the wheel. Some of the tools I'm going to be using, a 12mm socket and ratchet. Wrench works fine too. This is to take the 2 caliper bolts loose. I have a 7/16 wrench for the bleeder screw. I've got a little small wire brush for cleaning up the contact points on the caliper where the brake pad rides on the caliper, to clean all that rust and debris off. I'm going to be using a C-clamp like this. You can get them pretty cheap at Harbor Freight for compressing the brake caliper back. Also, another thing I'm going to be using, these are just a pair of needle nose vice grips. And what I do, I just take some fuel line and place over the end of it. I think this is 3/8 fuel line. And I use this to pinch off the brake hose going to the caliper, so when I open up that bleeder screw, I'm not introducing any air into the rest of the brake system. So usually I just start off by just clamping this off. And just tighten it up. That feels good there. That heater hose will keep the jaws on the needle nose vice grips from cutting the line, but it also prevents us from losing brake fluid out of the caliper and introducing air back into the system. Next, I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2 caliper bolts. Before I finish taking the bolts all the way out, while the caliper is still on the bracket, I'm going to go ahead and break this bleeder screw loose, because sometimes these can be stuck and be kind of hard to break open. So now it's broke loose, I'm just going to close it back off. That way I'm not fighting with it when the caliper is off of here. When I pulled this caliper off, this metal clip right here fell out, but normally it's in here. It's an anti-rattle clip, but when I took mine off, it just fell out. I just wanted to stick this in here. I'm having to change one of the calipers on the car. It's a little bit easier to show you on the bench. But that retaining clip that goes in here, if you're looking on the piston side of the caliper, that little dog ear goes up through here and it snaps onto this little bar right here on the top of the caliper. So that's how it should look. Most of the time when you get new brake pads, they're going to come with these new shims. But if your new brake pads come with these new shims, go ahead and replace them. I'm going to go ahead and knock that one out. And for the time being, I'm going to set that right there. And what I like to do is take a bungee cord, put around it, and you use this bungee cord to help keep this brake caliper from hanging by its hose and damaging the brake hose. Like that. I'm going to go ahead and get the caliper piston compressed back. So I'm just taking my C-clamp, putting one end over this bolt right here, and I'm running this side in. And I'm just running it in until I get it snugged up. Once I get it snugged up, I'm going to break this bleeder screw open. You don't have to break it open a whole lot. Just a little bit. You're going to lose a little bit of fluid. If you want to, you can put a drain pan under here. And I got this clamp on the brake hose, so I don't worry about leaking all my brake fluid out of the system and introducing air back into the system. When this is open, I'm going to make sure not to release the pressure off this piston, because if this is open and I release this pressure, this piston comes out, it can suck air through here. So if I go to loosen this up, I'm going to make sure to tighten that up. By doing this, it makes it easier to push this piston back, and also it keeps from pushing fluid back in the opposite direction through the ABS module that can damage the ABS module. Alright, now I have the piston compressed all the way back. I'm going to close my bleeder screw back off. Just make sure it's good and snug where it won't leak, but don't over tighten it. These things are horrible about stripping out. Once I got it closed off, I can now release the pressure off my C-clamp. Just take it on out. Next, I'm going to go ahead and remove the old brake pads. On this car, the pads, the front and back side pads, they're both the same. They're made the same way. It doesn't matter which one goes on the front or the back, on either side on the front. Next, I'm going to go ahead and clean everything down. Brakes parts cleaner, let it be soaking. One thing you want to make sure to do when you're doing brakes is making sure you got all the maintenance surfaces clean, that the pads ride on. You got your ears on your brake pads that fit in these channels on the caliper bracket. If them surfaces ain't clean and these brake pads bind up and stuff, it can cause them to stick and make noise and wear improperly. Next, I'm going to remove the caliper bracket. I'm doing this for two main reasons. Number one is to clean it up real good. It's easier to take it off to get these surfaces good and clean, and because I want to take these slider pins out, and I want to make sure the holes in the slider pins are good and clean and greased up. If these slider pins don't move freely, they will also cause a lot of braking issues and noise and uneven wear. To take this caliper bracket off, it's held on by two 15mm bolts on the back of it. After you take them two bolts out, it just slides on off. If you was replacing the rotors, you could remove the rotor at this time too, but I'm not replacing the rotors at this time. Now that I got the caliper bracket off, I'm going to take my wire brush and some brake parts cleaner, and here, and on the opposite side here and here, I'm going to clean up real good, because these are the points where the brake pads ride on. You can also use a wire wheel on a die grinder to clean them up. Makes it a little bit faster, but a wire brush will work. But you can see how shiny that is now. That's the way you want it to look. You want that metal to be smooth. Next, I'm going to pull these pins out, kind of separate them away from that rubber boot and pull them out. I'm going to take a paper towel, clean them off. Then I'm going to take some brake caliper grease, put a little bit on there. Then I'm just going to smooth it around on it. Make sure it's good and coated. And then I'm going to reinstall it back into the caliper bracket. Just push it in until it snaps back into that rubber boot. Kind of twist it around and move it back and forth a little bit to spread that grease out in here. And you see it turn smoothly. When you push it in, it'll pull back out. or when you pull it out, it'll start pushing its way back in. These rubber boots also help to pull them in and out. If they get stiff, sometimes it's a good idea to replace them too. But these are moving pretty good, so I'm not going to worry about it. Then I'm going to put just a little bit of brake caliper grease on each of these 4 points where the brake pad's right on. You don't want to go crazy with it, because you put too much on there, it builds up dirt and brake dust and stuff in that grease. So you want to be kind of sparingly with it. A little bit goes a long ways. That will help them pads move freely as they're working. Now I'm going to reinstall this caliper bracket back on. It's just doing the opposite of what you did beforehand. Make sure you got it turned the right way. It slides right back on there. This part of the brake caliper goes on the outside part of the steering knuckle. You got your 2 caliper bracket bolts. You can see they had red Loctite on it. I'm going to use blue Loctite. Blue Loctite's removable without heat, but that's all I got right now. And the blue Loctite will work just fine. Just make sure you torque it to the proper spec. On this car, it's spec for these bolts are 75 foot-pounds. After I got the brake caliper bracket back on, I got this shim for the brake caliper, this new one that came out of the brake pad kit. I'm going to put just a tiny bit of brake caliper grease on these shims on it that the top of the brake pad rides on. That way they can move freely there too. It doesn't take a whole lot, just a little bit. That'll help them move freely, and hopefully that'll make it where they don't make any noise. I'm going to take this bungee cord loose from this brake caliper. I'm going to slide it in there, then slide it up, and it fits in there just like that. Now I'm going to take my new brake pads. Going to put the inside one in. They fit in there just like that. With these springs facing towards the outside. One thing I forgot to mention is you can put just a little bit of brake caliper grease on the backing on the brake pad, and that can help prevent any noise. Just a little bit, and smear it around on there. Just make sure you don't get it on the pad side of it. Then you can slide the brake caliper back on. With that piston slide back all the way, it should go on there pretty easy. Now them springs that are on top of the brake pads, they kind of want to push this caliper back out. So you have to kind of give it a little bit of pressure to get your caliper bolt started. Me personally, I don't use any Loctite on the caliper bolts. I just torque them to spec, and I've never had any problems with them. To the best of my ability, I try to get the torque specs on these bolts. And I got, from research, I got between 20 and 25 foot-pounds of torque for the sliding bolts, caliper bolts. But me personally, I just get them good and snug until they ain't moving no more. As long as you get them good and tight, you won't have any problems with them. The caliper bracket bolts are more critical. If they come loose, all this comes flying off. If these come loose, the caliper's still held in place with the piston to the wheel. It's not like it can just fly off. The rims around here, it'll make a bunch of noise and stuff, and it can be dangerous, but it's not just going to come flying off. If this mounting bracket comes loose, you got much more problems. But if you get these good and snug and tight with a regular ratchet by hand, they're not going to come back loose. After I got the caliper back on, I'm just going to double check to make sure the bleeder screw is good and closed. I'm going to put the little dust cover back on, and I'm going to remove my hose clamp, and then I'm going to pump the brakes to fill the piston back up with fluid and to push the piston in tight with the brake pads, make sure that it's holding right, and then I can put the wheel back on, and this is done. Also, make sure to top off the brake fluid after doing each wheel so you don't introduce any air into the system. Fill it up to the full mark. And these cars take .3 brake fluid. And the lug nuts should be torqued to 95 foot-pounds of torque. So that's how I changed the brakes on my 1999 Ford Taurus. Like I said, I think this covers the Ford Taurus from 1996 to 2007, but the general process of it is pretty much the same for all disc brakes. Certain things you want to watch out for. I hope you found this video helpful. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.